Professionals and Coffee, where we delve into the world of public relations, communications, and integrated marketing. I'm your host, Carolina Salinas, and today we have a special guest, Johanna Ward, Senior Communications Strategist at BC College of Nurses and Midwives. Joining me is Aman Pukan, an emerging public relations practitioner. Welcome both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol, for this beautiful invitation and introduction. I'll just start asking you, what initially drew you to the field of communications, and how did you transition into the healthcare regulation space?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I always loved writing. All through high school, I was the editor of my high school newspaper. And all through my 20s, I did a lot of writing for local magazines and newspapers, but nothing too serious. And then when I was about 26, I think I went back to school and studied journalism, which was great. It was a really good introduction to writing and photography and investigation, and I loved the program. And I worked as a journalist here and there, but this was right around the time when a lot of journalism jobs were really starting to, newspapers were closing and there weren't a lot of jobs. So like a lot of other people, I transitioned into communications, and I started actually working with the Certified General Accountants of Canada, which is sort of like regulation, just because they hired me, and I worked there for a few years. And then I applied for the job with one of the previous organizations that is now where I work. We've had some amalgamations, and I just kind of stayed. I was talking with some colleagues today, and it's funny because I don't think any of us sort of started out being like, I want to work in regulatory communications, but it's actually I love it. I'm a bit of a nerd that way, but I feel like it's really important work. It's maybe not always super sexy, but regulation is the foundation of civil society. So yeah, so I've been working now in this healthcare regulation for nurses since 2012. So I guess 13 years now. So yeah.
Wow, that was great. I mean, when you said these things, it felt like it was so smooth, like when you were saying, but I can imagine the hard work you did.
Yeah.
Right?
It always sounds great when you're looking back, but yeah, lots of change and uncertainty too, of course.
So my next question is what does a typical day look like for you as a communication leader at the BC College of Nurses and Midwives?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I would say before COVID that we were probably a little more slow paced. Regulation for the most part moves pretty slowly. It's a lot of legislation and legal, but I don't know. The pandemic really turned everything on its head. We suddenly were getting demands from everybody to communicate and talk to the nurses and what's going on and tell everybody what's happening. And that pace seems to kind of stayed with us. There's a lot of change going in the healthcare system right now, as I'm sure you know, lots of challenges. And, we're involved in a lot of that. We have an extremely broad group of partners, I would say. We had, when we did our rebrand, you guys are commenting on our beautiful background. In 2020, we worked with a branding company, and they said, we've never worked with an organization that had such a diverse group of partners and stakeholders, because we have the public, and we have government, and then we have the nurses that we regulate, and then we have all the big employers where nurses work, and then we have unions, and then we have Indigenous communities, with pretty much everybody. And so it really just sort of depends on the day what's going to happen. Some days I'm working with my client groups. I primarily support our policy team, and I do a lot of our Indigenous specific anti-racism work. I work with that department a lot of issues management. Some days we're managing media issues. We're going to do some media training coming up. We have a new CEO, so we're going to be working with her. Working on newsletters, writing content. So lots of different things. I mean, we do try to sort of tie everything back up to our strategic objectives. But sometimes I have a list of things I'm going to do and I don't get anything done, but I feel like I've been working all day. So yeah, there's a lot of different kinds of work that we do in the day. So that's good. It keeps things fresh.
Sounded like there's a lot on the to-do list for you right now.
going on.
I'm gonna agree with you. Like after the pandemic and during the pandemic, lots of things have changed, and the regulations, the rules,
You're absolutely
policy.
right. One of the things that we noticed during the pandemic, because it was like, you have to change things. You have to, like fix this regulation so the nurses can do this. A lot of things that we had to quickly be able to, nurses could do something remotely, or they could do something without supervision because we needed it to protect public. And I think when the pandemic finished, we tried to stop and go, okay, so we can't always just not do all of the work we would do, but how can we streamline things a little bit? Because we were able to move very quickly when we needed to. And so it's like, why do we make things so complicated all the time? So we're really trying to find some learnings from that. One of the sort of philosophies we have is called right touch regulation. So it means like using the least amount of regulatory force to achieve our objectives. So not bothering with things that aren't our job, and really focusing in on our work in a very focused and thoughtful way. Yeah, early in the pandemic, we sent a lot of emails out that we probably shouldn't have sent, like that weren't really ours to communicate, like how to get vaccinated. And there was a lot going on. So I think it was a real learning experience for us to really focus on what is our work and let other people, stay in our lane, which was helpful.
Related with this, Joanne, so for instance, and I think you have already answered part of this next question. What are some of the biggest communications challenge unique to healthcare regulations, and how do you navigate them? Certainly you have plenty during the COVID, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, it is a unique communication. I would say one of the things that I'm trying to be very thoughtful about is, our mandate is to protect the public, but a lot of the work we do is with the nurses and midwives we regulate. There are almost 70,000 nurses and midwives in British Columbia, so we're the largest regulator in Western Canada. I think, we think the work we do is really interesting and important, but quite frankly, your average nurse working on a unit, she barely has time to use the bathroom. So she doesn't want a 10-page email from me about legislative changes, right? I think being really, really thoughtful and focused and respectful of the time that nurses have. So really communicating with them clearly and concisely, only when we need to, and just being like, this is what you need to know, and this is how it affects you. And that can be tricky because I work with a lot of really smart people who do complicated work, policy analysts and lawyers, and they want to they're like, oh, we have to tell them all the things. And I'm like, they don't care. And it's not that it's not important, but it doesn't, they don't have the bandwidth to take that on. So being really diplomatic in how I come back to sort of going, okay, so we're going to edit this down to be this long instead of this long, because otherwise they're not going to read it. So that's something that I'm trying to be really mindful of, particularly nowadays. The healthcare system is strained, I would say, not broken, but very stretched. And so being thoughtful and really, again, like a lot of the work that we do is kind of behind the scenes. Nurses don't really need to know that we did, that this bylaw changed and this is how we're going to, they just need to know, what does this mean for me? I think that communicating with the public is also tricky because they're very diverse. It's hard to explain sometimes what we do. A lot of people get confused. They think that we're advocates. Our job is not to try to make the workplace better for nurses or, get their wages up, but there's different organizations that do that. So helping the public and other people understand what we do. We do a lot of work trying to educate the media about that too. We can talk about that a little bit later.
Very, very interesting. So it's very interesting, but very challenged as well, because it's a field that requires a lot of attention, and right now it's in very high demand, right? Country need nurses and doctors.
Absolutely. And they have so much going on already, and trying to not add to their burden, really, and just being like, because there are some things they do need to know. We set the standards, right? Like you have to meet these standards. That's the law, right? So, but how do we make it relevant? How do we use that plain language? How do we, instead of, using really complicated legal language, how do we simplify it? How do we make sure that it makes sense in the context of the workplace? I also find that, we've been, during COVID, we started having regular meetings with all of the other communications people at the other regulators in BC and with the communication staff at the nursing regulators across Canada. And that was so helpful because we are all dealing with the same issues. And so we can talk about best practices and we can say like, how are you guys dealing with this and how are you managing that? And again, relationships, right? Like, I know the communications director over at the BC Centre for Disease Control. So it's easy to just pick up the phone and be like, hey, this just came in. How are we going to deal with this? So I think really building those relationships with other communicators is helpful too, because you guys know with comms people, you can just be like, okay, brass tacks, let's just get down to it. So that's been really helpful as well. Really starting to build those relationships.
So if I'll ask you, like, in your experience, what role does issues management play in maintaining public trust within healthcare institutions?
It's so important. Yeah, it's massively important. I mean, I think that if you look at a lot of those, you know, like the Edelman Trust Barometer and stuff, we're starting to see that there's a real erosion in public trust in public institutions. I think with the internet, you can find anybody out there to agree with anything. So I think that it's more important than ever that we are seen as credible, as trusted. You know, we have to have the social license to operate, right? People have to respect us. You know, when it comes to issues management and media, we get media inquiries all the time, I would say every day. A good chunk of them are not for us. They are not for the work that we do. And so I do quite often send them over to like the Professional Association or the Ministry of Health. But we always respond. It's important to me that we are friendly, we're prompt, we're approachable. And even if we don't comment, I always try to take it as an opportunity to be like, oh, but by the way, we don't do this, but these are all the things we do. And if you ever want to talk to us about that. So try to take that as an opportunity. And we don't often do it, but we have gone out in the last couple of years with almost like a proactive media approach. We were really focused on unauthorized practice of midwifery. So people who are holding themselves out to say, oh, I can be your midwife, but they can't. It's a protected title. And we were getting really sad reports about terrible things happening with, you know, people who didn't know what they were doing. And so we did a proactive campaign and we actually had really good success with that. I was really pleased with the uptake. So I do think that, and we're just trying to get out in front of that. So, but it's very important. People will always fill the void of misinformation. So the more we can get out there and get the message out and get it out correctly, the better. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true, 100%. I mean, like,
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. And even like, you know, as a vice chair of the CPRS Foundation, like, how do you support or mentor like upcoming professionals in the PR field?
Yeah, so the foundation is such a great organization. We're still kind of finding our feet, but one of the things that we are able to do is provide scholarships to students from traditionally underrepresented communities. You know, there's a lot of talk about diversity, but I genuinely believe, and I know this from experience, that the product is always better, the work is always better when you have a diverse voices at the table. And so I think that, you know, bringing more Indigenous students in, more students of color, I think that it genuinely, the more diverse communications and PR field can be, the better, because, you know, the work we do is we speak for organizations. And I think that, you know, we all bring our own biases and stuff. And I think when you have someone with a fresh perspective to come in and challenge you and say, no, but what about this? I think it's always better. So we have some work to do on fundraising. We're still a little bit small, but we're working on it. The foundation doesn't offer mentorship, but the Canadian Public Relations Society, at least the Vancouver chapter that I'm a member of, does offer mentoring. I've worked as a mentor in the past. You meet a few times a year with someone you're partnered with. And I think some of the other local societies do as well. You know, and that's one of the reasons that I was so pleased when Caroline reached out, is I've benefited so much in my career from people who've taken the time to just have coffee with me or talk with me. And so I always try to do that when people ask me, you know, to just share my experience. So yeah, I think most people, if you reach out to them and say, can you just chat with me for 20 minutes or go for a coffee? Most people, I think, should say yes. Maybe they won't, but I think that, you know, I think it's a very collaborative industry. And so, yeah, so I'm always available to talk to people who are coming up.
Thank you very much, Johanna. Now, looking back a little bit about some pivotal moments or decisions in your career that significantly shape your career path? Something that you want to share with us and with our audience?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this earlier, and I think mine was kind of an unexpected opportunity. So when I finished journalism school, an opportunity came up to go to Tokyo, weirdly, to work at a newspaper for a month and do layout for them. It was through one of the professors at the school. And so I went with a couple of other students from my class, and we did that for a month, and then we still had time on our visas. And so I thought, well, I'll stay. Why not? Right. And I taught English for a couple months, and I was terrible at it and I hated it. But then I applied for a job at the national news agency. It's called Kyoto News. And they, it's kind of like the Canadian Press of Japan. And working in there as a copy editor. So what they would do is they would have people translate all the stories that went out on the wire, and then English native speakers would rewrite them. And I got that job. And so that was a turning point for me, because I had never, like, it was just like I got dipped into the world of international journalism, and, it was crazy, this stuff. Like, I worked 9/11, right? Like, it was just, so it's not something I planned, but it was an opportunity that arose, and I would never have had those opportunities if I had stayed here in Canada. So yeah, so I guess that was just luck or fate. I'm not sure, but it really did sharpen up my writing and toughen me up and teach me a lot about, when you live in another part of the world, you see different perspectives, right? Like, it's a very different worldview on the other side of the world. So that was really good for me. It really opened my eyes. And I think that, sort of just more generally, as I'm getting older and more experienced, I really am just more trusting my instincts. Like, when you feel like something's not right, or you think you should, I think a lot of the times when you're younger, you question yourself, but I'm finding the older I get, the more I'm like, yeah, no, I was right the first time, right? Like, just trusting what my initial thoughts are. So I don't know if that's really a pivotal moment, but that's definitely something that I'm noticing as I'm getting older and more experienced.
Wow, that was a great experience.
I mean, like when we talk about your experiences, like we all know like how valuable insights you and experience you have right now. So, like regarding that only, like what skills or qualities do you believe are essential, for success in senior communication roles in today?
That's a great question. I would say that you need to learn how to work successfully with different leaders, different styles of leaders. One of the things that as a senior comms professional is sort of giving that strategic advice, strategic counsel. So you need to know what's going on in your organization. You can't just stay in your own little box. Your job is to know what's happening with, the policy and the board and the government and what's happening in the environment. Because you need to be able to pitch them and say, this is how we should do it. Make the case for why communication should be at the table, I think it's important to be humble. You need to be able to admit when you're wrong or you've made a mistake. I think particularly as, starting when you're leading a team, supporting people to be their best selves. Being a lifelong learner, being open-minded and curious, joining a professional association, going to events, doing webinars with cool people like you guys. I think that it's important to keep your mind open and hear what other people are thinking. Challenge yourself to listen to other points of view. Don't get cynical. I think that sometimes part of my job is to kind of always consider the worst case scenario, and it can be easy to get a little bit sort of down the rabbit hole. So I think it's important to remember to try to stay positive, to see the best. I think most people are coming in with good intentions. I'm a big fan of plain language. I struggle every day with lawyers and policymakers who want to capitalize everything. And I'm like, no, we use CP style. Writing simply and clearly and plainly is difficult. Yes, I see your style back there. I was so happy when I saw that, Caroline. I love it. I have my little caps and spelling here because it's better. It's clearer, right? And so I would say that, keep that in your back pocket. And I think my last tip would be learn how to use AI. It's not going anywhere. And I don't think it's going to replace communicators, but I also think that you'd be foolish to not start understanding all the things it can do for us and what it can't do. So we're trying to just dump a lot of stuff into it. We have like not password protected, but something within our system that we're allowed to use it, even though we're a regulator. There's some sort of filter on it. So like I don't think I would just start dumping data into Chat GPT for work. But it is a really useful tool. And I think even if you're not going to be using it every day in your work, you need to have the skills to be like, this is how we would use it, this is when we would use it. Because it's not going. Yeah.
My question is a little bit related with what you have just answered. How do you stay current with now these emerging trends and technology?
Yeah.
AI, in public relations and communications.
Yeah. So, I mean, I go on LinkedIn a lot. There's a lot of good stuff on there, quite frankly. Social media. I know Twitter or X is sort of out of favor, but I still check it every night, partly to monitor some of the stuff we do at work. But social media, yeah, and events like this Canadian Public Relations Society puts on a lot of events that I find really, really helpful. I get some newsletters, and really also those those networking meetings that we have with other communicators, particularly in healthcare. I find really helpful because a lot of times some of the solutions that we can like we have to keep all our data in Canada as an example, right? Just legally. So it really limits things we can like survey platforms and newsletters and stuff. So chatting with other regulators in Canada, they'll be like, oh, this is how we got around this requirement, or oh, this is the platform you should use for this. So that is always helpful too. And I think as it relates to just because it's healthcare regulation doesn't mean it's not regulation. So I really do try to keep up with, what's happening, just best practices around regulation, right? Right now, the trend seems to be, at least in us, is amalgamations, bringing small organizations together to make bigger ones. Because they're more nimble and whatever. I feel like in 25 years, it'll be like, no, smaller is better. I think it always goes in cycles. But I think that, staying on top of what's going on in your industry is always good to know too. Yeah.
It's very smart what you're doing, your own research, what they are doing, other organizations there.
Oh.
So, okay, my apartment is in the good path, or maybe you can take some ideas from other departments.
And we all really do the same work. So it's like, why do we keep reinventing the wheel, right? Like, let's just do it that way. Okay, great, done. So save some time. Yeah.
Okay. Also, as we talked about the healthcare industry, if you have to advise, what advice would you give to someone looking to break into healthcare communication or healthcare regulations?
I would say understand how the system works and who the players are. We are hiring right now for a communications coordinator, and I think we've had like 130 applications. And I'm amazed at how many people, I don't even think they've read our website. Regulation is a pretty unique field. It's not advocacy. It's not, we work with our partners to try to make the healthcare system better, but there's, like we have nothing to do with recruiting nurses to BC, right? Or advocating for wages. And so making sure you understand kind of what the different organizations do and how they work together. We're very, as it relates to regulation, we work within a legislative framework. And so we're limited in some of the things we can do. And we have, legal obligations that we have to meet. And so it does, to some extent, limit a little bit the things that we can do. So we can be on social media, but, we're not probably going to be doing TikTok dances, right? It's kind of, I think we can be on TikTok. We're not, but I think we need to be. But it's, so understanding that sort of the distinctions between those things. When we were doing our branding project, we had one company that pitched us and they were throwing out words and they were like playful. And I was like, we are never playful. we can be humorous sometimes, but we're the regulator. We're kind of like the police, the government, and that's fine. But that's what we do, and we can be interesting and diverse within that framework. But really understanding the role that the different organizations play, because if you don't, then you're not going to be able to communicate effectively about it. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for that insight. And so I'll be asking my last question of this podcast. So how has your education at Royal Roads University contributed to your professional development? And would you recommend similar programs to upcoming aspiring communicators?
I loved my time at Royal Roads. I didn't really know until I started there that there's a whole communications theory and science and best practices and research that kind of underpin our field. It really grounds you in, the rhetorical school of thought and this kind of communication. And I think that, I don't know, I always joke that, communications people, everybody thinks they can do our job. Everyone's like, oh, I'm a writer, I'm a designer. And so this really, it helped remind me that this is actually a field of study. This is a profession. There is a whole school of thought and best practices, and people study this and they research and do the work. And so I feel like that really, it really grounded me. And I think it gave my work more sort of validity. But I will say it is not cheap. And so I don't know that for every aspiring communicator, it's feasible, quite frankly. I also, for a fraction of the price, I think it's like $500 or $600, did the Canadian Public Relations Society APR program. So that's the accreditation of public relations, and that is more of a self-directed model. It's like you go through with the local societies pair you up with cohorts. But I found that to be, if not equally valuable, then very valuable. And that really grounds you in practical. So the RACE formula. So really the best practices around, you do your research, and then you do some analysis, and only then do you communicate, and then you evaluate. And that for me was a good reminder too, because I think when we get busy, we just kind of go. We're not stepping back and going, are we actually doing a good job here? Like, are we even evaluating our results? And so that reminded me of the value of the best practices, right? That it is important, and it makes your recommendations and the work you do when you can point to it and show the person who does the budget and go, look, we increased this much because we did this, right? So really backing it up with data and facts, analytics. Some of it can be a bit, it's not, there's not a lot of qualitative maybe data, but a lot of good quantitative data. So I would recommend that as sort of like for a mid-career person. They also have the PRK exam for early people. But yeah, I actually found that to be incredibly helpful and useful. I was fortunate to go through with a couple of other women who sat on the CPRS board with me, and they really held me to account. I tend to leave things to the last minute. I'm a bit of a procrastinator, and we divided up the reading. But yeah, I think that as an educational opportunity was also very, very valuable.
Well, thank you, Johanna, for sharing your knowledge and expertise with our audience. Thank you so much, Aman, for co-hosting this coffee chat with me. Before leaving this episode, where can we find you, Johanna and Aman, on social media?
Oh, it's just linkedin.com/in/Johanna Ward. I must have gotten lucky. And then I think it's the same on Twitter. And then I'm on Facebook, but it's just pictures of my cats. So I would say LinkedIn and Twitter are the places you want to find me. Yeah, I'm at Johanna Ward on Twitter as well. So, but yeah, LinkedIn is kind of where I'm doing most of my professional now.
Thank you.
For me, yeah, it's just type in my name, Aman Fukan, on LinkedIn, and also on Instagram. You can find me like posting some new clothes, new fashion vlogs, or maybe a day in life. Yeah, so Instagram and LinkedIn, yeah, these are the two most social media apps I use right now.
Okay, well, that concludes our conversation with Johanna Ward, Communications Leader in Healthcare Regulation, and Aman Pukan, Emerging Public Relations Practitioners. Thank you both. Thank you for joining us today. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and podcast platforms for more episodes, and join us next time and as we explore more topics in the world of public relations, marketing, and communications. Until then, take care and bye for now.